and checked in the changes which is available in the source control system. And the build server, which is the CI server, can automatically detect the changes has been checked into a particular area of the source control. So the CI server can check out the code or the related assemblies from the source control, can build and create the artifacts. Say for example, if it is in the report, files, data source, datasets, and if you use any assemblies, that also can be extracted, built, and that can be deployed into a given test environment. This could be your unit test or system test integration environment, or it could be a UAT test environment. Once that has been deployed to a test environment, we can also schedule to run automated test cases. This could be again unit test cases, what the developer has already built, part of the process, or it could be a regression test suite if you have proper capacity to have a testing team. Then obviously that's a place where they will interact here. Once we have run through the automated test cases, the results of the test cases and the build verification can also be created as a dashboard report that will be circulated or feedback to the developer. Assume the scenario here where I get the feedback. For example, if I have mistakenly checked in a code which there isn't any reference or which I haven't validated, probably in a short span of time, maybe within 5 to 10 minutes, I will get notified that I have broken the build. And that will also highlight where there is an issue, depends on your configuration. I can immediately modify my code. So this is which help us to test as we develop. Who will be the consumer or users of CI? Obviously, as per the workflow, mostly the developers. The concept of CI is actually built for the development team, but nowadays this can be leveraged for the test engineers, as they are also part of the workflow. They develop the test framework, test harness that can also be integrated into the CI workflow for automation test cases. Also, in some cases, they do cover unit test cases as well. Nowadays, organizations find very helpful from a CI perspective, and they have got a role of release manager who maintain multiple environments for different projects. It could be one person or it could be one person per project. CI helps the release manager, so their responsibility has been reduced. They can concentrate more on the strategy rather than implementing or releasing a particular functionality to a given environment. As it helps the development team and the testing team, indirectly this increases the productivity and reduces the cost. This also helps the business and the project management to keep the tight deadlines at the right time, so we can go and agree for any milestone at a given time. As we find out the bugs are early in the stage, then we are confident most of our issues related with the code or integration issues can be detected at an early stage. We understand the basics and we know who will be using the CI. And what is the advantages of using CI in a typical organization? As the development team works very closely with the testing team and other stakeholders of the project, and everyone get notified immediately who has modified, what has broken, and it's a cohesive development. Say in your organization or a project, if you have got 10 to 15 developers work on one project, obviously you will have a tight dependencies, who has modified the change, and developer A could be waiting for developer B to complete, or the changes modified by the developer A could impact developer B. All this kind of integration related issues can be identified easily and early in the stage. So it's not the case early in the 90s where we develop individually and then we integrate. The integration time will take quite a long time. For example, if you're working part of a very big project and which has got 20 or 30 modules to develop, and integration itself will take probably a month or something to complete. Nowadays, you can leverage CI to integrate early, so you reduce the risk. Also, this is great for the developers. I test my code as I develop, and immediately I'll get notified if I've broken my build or if there are any issues with the code I have developed. Nowadays, organizations are utilizing CI very effectively because very keen on agile-based projects, and it's a quite good turnaround time as well. Now we understand CI is a practice, a software engineering methodology which helps us to reduce the bugs. So definitely we need a tool to implement the CI in our organization or project. There are some commercial products available in the market, and these are the few top products. And there are some open source projects also available in the market. Depends on your organization need. If you are not using CI, you could explore and you could compare the tools to find out the suitability of the product for your organization, and you could explore further in this topic. Now we have a question here, why we need CI for reporting services. CI has been used very consistently, very keenly in application development environment. If application development team can leverage, why can't a BI or a reporting team can leverage? Obviously, when you develop a report, you are depending on a number of source systems. It could be relational, multidimensional, or anything else around in-house built or third-party systems. You might have been supplied a requirements document to develop a report against. You develop the report that works great on your local machine. You are happy, confident about the report, but when you deploy to another environment, the report may not work. And it is assumed that you have done something which is wrong. And most of the times, project managers and the business users, it is a very standard question from the team. A report is just a simple SQL query, select asterisk from a table. What else can go wrong? This is something wrong. But as a developers, only we know there could be so many other dependencies behind the report. It's not about only the SQL query. It's about the tablic's behavior, or how we grouped, or what conditional expression we have written on the report to display or not to display. Or it could be absolutely no issues with your report. It could be the third party. For example, you are working on a data source system which need to be supplied by a vendor, and they have given a new patch which has been rolled out in UAT that has broken your report. So how can we validate this kind of dependencies errors at the early stage? That's where our continuous integration practice helps. Also, as we understand from our previous slides, which helps the report developers, you don't need to wait for in the long run to understand the issues. This helps build a proper regression test suite. We don't need to run through a manual test cases for each and every patch or supplied by the vendor or in-house development team whenever they go for migration. Either it could be the source system migration or technological migration. If there are no changes to the report expected in a given environment, deploy the relevant changes on the data sources or the source system, deploy your existing reports, data sources, data sets alike, and then run through the regression test suite, which will give a clear indication what has broken, what is working, and you will have a consolidated report to work it out. And this gives the information for the business users whether to proceed with the migration or what is the impact to the reporting team to fix the report. And there are other advantages, such as we can schedule the deployment and the execution of unit test cases, or you can also manually run. Depends on the need. Okay, there's a little commercial break. I'd like to thank this opportunity from Pragmatic Works, who was sponsored by Pragmatic Works. They do a lot of community services, something like the webinar, which is currently going on. They do also have a lot of free training on their website, which is done by a lot of experts. In addition, Pragmatic Works also do provide commercial tools such as BA Express, Doc Express. These are all developer productivity tools. I would appreciate if you can have a look and see whether your organization can get benefit from these tools. In addition, they are also a consulting company. They do provide consulting on the areas like BI, big data, and cloud solution. Feel free to check their website. I have been benefited in the past. I'm sure you will find loads of useful information as well. Also, I take this opportunity to thank Scott for the contribution to the community. Scott generally provides information on MS SQL tips, and that was very helpful for me as well. Okay, assume now here I'm going to take an example. Assume I'm a developer. I have been asked to develop a report. So I have identified a report from AdventureWorks. So this is a territory sales report which I have deployed to my local instance. This is a consolidated sales based on the territory. We can see Australia, Canada, France, and the overall sales. Now I have developed and I have deployed to my local instance, say, and I'm comfortable. But how can I be sure that this report should work in a given test environment or in a typical UAT environment? I will take you through an example how this can be validated during automated deployment, and as well as writing unit test cases, which also can be integrated into CI. There might be some questions from the audience. What tool we are talking about here? I would like to use this opportunity to provide information for CI and how we can integrate the reporting services development methodology into CI, irrespective of the tools, the demo and the scripts and the fixtures. What I'm going to walk you through, it's very generic. You can integrate this concept into any given CI tool. Most of the CI tools, they do support to integrate a script, say PowerShell script, or to integrate MS Build or NUnit to run your test cases. So on this session, I'm going to provide the basics, but however, if there are more feedback from you to would like to know about a particular tool or to how to implement this concept on a particular tool, I'm also happy to take that training to a next stage in a different session. Okay. I'll quickly So this is the slide. We have seen a typical workflow. As a developer, now I have developed a directory sales report. I have checked into my source control. Now assume we have got a CI tool which understand that this can be extracted from the source control system. Now how to build the components what we have already developed and checked into source control. As we all know, the reporting files and as well as datasets are all XML. So there is nothing to build over here. The CI server will allow you to configure, to deploy, or to copy the files from a source control to a given or a target environment. So assume this will be a physical file copy from one location to the other location where you deploy, build and deploy. In case of application development, or for example a class library, then it makes sense for a build where you have got a class library, and say if you're using C# files, that will be checked into source control, and the CI server extract the assembly files, class files, and then will build and will create an assembly. So where that will be more appropriate for the build. In the CI, assume you have identified a particular CI server. In what ways you can set up a build? We have got few ways to set up the build. As I have explained in the workflow, the CI tools generally will allow you to monitor a particular project in a source control repository, where if any developer or something has modified on that directory, the CI tool will detect some changes have been made, and then which would extract the relevant assembly and then would start building upon based on the changes. In typical some organization where there will be quite a lot of changes happening and we don't want to build based on the dynamic nature of the organization, and also for example you might have got a deadline to submit or deliver the code base to a given environment, so you could say particular date and time. So obviously you can very well schedule for a given date and time. Assume it will be a responsibility of the release manager to take care and maintain the strategy and trigger or schedule based on the tool. Also sometime based on the developer needs. If I don't want to wait for that schedule to happen, and if I want to test my assembly or the component before that time, there will be option to do a manual run or the ad hoc run. So you just simply configure your plan to trigger, which would extract 11 components from the repository and then would start build. And obviously as the project grows further and further, there will be a need for combination of multiple things. Also the CI tools will generally support this kind of build as well. Now we have built all the relevant files, the report files, datasets, data source, and we have deployed. Assume we have deployed to a given environment. Now we need to run the automated test cases to validate the deployment. Generally we can think of two ways of testing automation for the reports. If your organization support a massive testing team with a good test strategy, then Selenium WebDriver based test automation helps. And the Selenium can also test from a SSRS report manager, and as well as if the SSRS reports have been integrated using a web application, that also can be accommodated using Selenium. This is generally for a high scale project where you have got a proper budget and the resources and a skilled test engineers who has got great knowledge about Selenium and how to incorporate Selenium for the reporting services. Small to medium size development team and organization like to leverage the test automation or want to explore the test automation in the first step before go to Selenium. Then NUnit. NUnit is a test framework which has been widely used by application development team that can be leveraged to test our SSRS reports. I'm sure here we have a question, why do we need test automation? In the CI environment where we deploy the code to a given test environment, how can we assure the build, whatever the code checked in by the developers, is integrated well and which is expected to work well? The only way to test that is a run through the test automation. And there's another additional feature: if there is a proper test team and if you can build proper regression test suite, then this is a great benefit. All the business requirements are quite complex in nature to validate, or it would be very difficult for a person to remember to relevant functionalities and prepare the test cases. Even a simple report will have minimum 30 or 40 test cases. So if you want to reduce the cost of the testing resource, obviously this is a great advantage. And as we go along, if your data source is depending on vendor products or in-house build, and if this is agile based project, and obviously once in every 2 weeks, depends on your sprint length, you may need to change your report or assembly quite frequently. So this is another advantage to have a test automation for the reports in an agile based project. On this demo, I have selected NUnit as my test framework. It's easy to integrate with Visual Studio, and we can also leverage the concept of NUnit to test for the SSRS report. There's few steps involved to develop a test case. Before that, we need to understand there will be multiple ways, and one of the way what I'm going to show you, I'm going to export the report into an XML. Then I'm navigating the XML document, collecting the results, and validating that results against the data which is available in the data source. In my case, as it's an adventure work database, I have written a simple SQL query to get the results from the database. In other side, I have got SSRS report where I can export the results of the particular report into an XML, and I'm going to compare these results together, and if I'm expect the results to match. And if there are any issues with my report, and if I've got duplicates, depends on my tablet's design, or if I'm missing something because of some condition, the test case would fail, and obviously I'll get notified immediately, and I will be able to look into the aspects why this is failed. Is it expected failure or is it not expected? Then I can modify my code, I can fix it. Okay, I'll walk through the test cases. This is a typical Visual Studio. I have created a class library for the purpose of creating unit test cases. This is a very simple and straightforward test case. You could leverage the functionality further to make it as a production ready code. If time permits, I will explain what is the next steps involved to make this as a production ready code. I have got a utility, a class library, and I have written few functions to validate against. Let me quickly walk through my function, which will give some idea what I am doing. And also I have got a class which is an unit test cases covered on this. Here I'm referring an unit framework where I have got a test fixture where I'm creating the connection for the SSRS and also for the SQL Server to execute my query, and which is a test fixture setup where we create connecting. Here I'm connecting the SSRS using a web reference. I have included SSRS as a web reference, so I'll be able to access my reporting services. In a production environment where generally we keep all the database connection and the reporting service connection in a config file, which is app.config, which I haven't mentioned here, but this is a place where we generally keep all the details. This is where we need to maintain so that we can leverage based on a given test environment. The configuration of the reporting service or data source details will be different from one environment to other environment. So we didn't want to hardcode anything like this, but this is for the purpose of demo. And I have detailed what's the name of the report, what I'm looking for. Here I'm accessing a method in the utility, which is export SSRS report, passing the reference of the SSRS server, the folder where I'm accessing, and the report name. And this is returning a XML document. To quickly go through functionality of export SSRS report. And this is pretty straightforward functionality to access SSRS using a web reference. I am passing the relevant information parameters here, the report service URL. The report service URL, what we use is different from the report manager. This is a web service URL, the name of the server, instance name, report execution 2005 or 2010, depends on your configuration. But ASMX WSDL, which is a web service reference rather than a report manager URL. So that's what expected here. And here I'm passing the relevant configuration information, what I'm expecting, what is the encoding, and the warning type, what I'm expecting. I am executing the information. Here I am exporting the report into an XML. I'll quickly show you. In SSRS, we have got a functionality to export the data against the XML, and this is what basically I'm doing. Quickly walk through. Okay, I'm exporting this as an XML. So this is an XML what I'm going to export from the SSRS utility, and I will be able to look through and consolidate results from this XML. And based on the results, I'm going to export the XML, and the XML document will be returned to the calling function. It's the territory sales unit here. And I have written another function to convert the XML document into a dictionary, a list of dictionary, which is a two-dimensional array in a simple definition. This would convert, and this functionality will look based on a specific expression, XPath expression. Will look through it and then will read the territory and the overall sales alone. As this is one of my test case, based on your condition, you could expand this functionality further to validate on a business, based on a business nature. So here I'm passing what information I'm looking for in XML territory and the total sales territory. Finally, that will return in terms of a dictionary, which is comprises of the value, which is the territory, and the sales for the territory as a value, as a list of dictionary object. Also here I'm executing the SQL query. Quickly go through another method in my utility, execute. So this is my SQL query. If you see from a SQL Management Studio, a simple query which has written the territory and the overall sales to walk through. And this is what the query will be executed and the results will be returned. And I'm also converting this as a list of dictionary object, comparing against the export, the XML results. So using ADO.NET, the query has been consolidated here. Again, from a production environment, this is not an ideal way where we would store the connection information, everything in the connection config. So I'm executing here using ADO.NET, reading the details, convert as a list of dictionary, preparing the dictionary, and send the dictionary back to the calling function. So this is where, as a test fixture setup, where now by this time I have got two lists of dictionary. One is from XML, which is exported from the report. The other list of dictionary is executed from ADO.NET SQL query. Here I have written a basic test. So this test I'm calling another function, which is compare list of dictionary, where I am passing both the list of dictionaries, comparing against. Okay, now I assume I have developed my test cases using NUnit framework. Now I need to build assembly. So this is how I build. So using MS Build, most of the CI tools, they do support MS Build plugin. So you don't need to write this a long script. You simply select the plugin name and locate from which artifact you are selecting upon against, pass the relevant parameter. Here identified this need to be built and the output provided in the bin directory, and this has successfully built and provided an assembly. Now upon the successful build, I need to run my test cases. So this is what I'm executing. You can see NUnit console. For clarity, I would go here. So I'm using a NUnit console to run my test cases, where I'm supplying the one which is built from, which is available in debug. Obviously in a production you will have a relevant release folder. So I'm executing this NUnit. This would take a minute, I think. Okay, so this is done. Which has reported that there are no errors, which has compared both the list of dictionary, provided the results. So based on this, I'm happy. I have my changes are working fine. No more issues with my development. I can proceed further. Going back to the presentation slide. Now another phase on the CI is automation of deployment. So assume now we have built the artifacts from the source code, but we need to deploy to a given environment. Obviously, again, to leverage the concept of CI, we need to automate this. What we will be deploying against, we will receive the information, for example, a target SSRS server, a web service URL, and the data source detail. It could be vary from one environment to other environment, credentials. I'm sure all the organizations are using a service account, so you need to configure the service account and the password for the given data source, which would vary based on the environment. Also, based on multiple environment, you need to define the security, which environment, which report is accessible for whom. Everything can be done using the script. I'm cautious of time, so I'm going to quickly walk through this so that I can quickly jump to answer a few questions from the audience. So this is a PowerShell script I'm using. Here I'm reading the relevant parameters from as an input. It could be the location of a folder, SSRS URL, a web service URL, and where do I need to locate, what is the name of data source, data set, and how we define the security. All this information will be read, validating the parameters. Using PowerShell script, I'm creating a proxy for the web service for the SSRS that will be used to deploy the data sources and data set and define the connection. Here I have got a number of functions to cover up against. One function is to validate, and let's say if a particular report folder is already available, delete all the relevant folders and recreate the folders. So whenever you do that, your build will be clean. You are not integrating issues with the previous build. And this section talks about to loop through the every individual components, such as data source and the data set. In a typical data source, where you need to look through one data source and get the relevant connection details, name of the server, and the connection string details that will be configured against. Very similar with data sets and the reports, and mainly on the reports we define the security settings. So this is by providing the relevant parameters and executing this PowerShell script, we will be able to deploy the reports into a given environment. Okay, now what we have done so far, we developed a report and we have checked into source control. The source control, based on the monitoring, the CI build server has built all the artifacts, and using the PowerShell script we were able to successfully deploy the relevant artifacts into a given test environment. We have also developed the unit test cases. We built the unit test cases, we deployed, and using NUnit console we were able to run all the unit test cases, and we are comfortable with our release. Now, what is the next steps based on this session? I've already seen that some of you are already using CI. So if you're already using CI, if you want to explore further, you could use this solution or customize the solution based on your needs. I've also seen there are so many of you very keen to implement the CI on your organization. What would be the first step is to evaluate the CI tools based on your need. If you haven't implemented CI, then I would definitely recommend maybe open source project. Try and see what else, how far you can fit this requirement into your organization. That will help you to convince your team lead or a business to sell your idea. Now, Going to questions.
Yes, feel free if you have any questions to go ahead and put them in the Q&A area that is on the GoToMeeting toolbar that will normally show up on the right side of your presentation. So feel free to place them there.
Someone asked, what about the sample scripts available on this session? Yes, I will arrange for this to upload in an area which may be accessible for you. Okay, so someone asked a question, a very interesting question. So the question basically, we are using a very similar query which is developed against in the report, and as well as we use the same query in the test case. So obviously we expect the same result. A very good question. In a typical scenario where a developer develops the report, but however the test cases could be written by the test team, or the test cases could be shared with your peer to develop the test cases against, not the report, against the reporting requirements. So the query would be different and you could get different results. Most of the questions are based on the source code, which I have explained. This is an interesting question. Do we need to install SSDT and BI on your build server? No. Reason behind depends on your CI server. Most of the CI server support the plugins, how we can build. As I mentioned in SSRS, where we don't need to build anything, as it's a clearly XML files need to be deployed. However, if you are developing test cases using NUnit, most of the CI tools or CI servers will support MS Build, so that will be already plugged in. So it's a case of you identifying the relevant plugin with the appropriate version, and you identify your artifact, which test cases you want to run against or build against. So it is definitely feasible. Without using SSDT, you would be able to leverage a framework. Okay, another interesting question. How do we maintain the security of the data set? What can be done? I have shown a sample of PowerShell script. What we could do, we could have defined security in a particular document or an XML that can be read from the PowerShell script. When you deploy a report or a data source, you can look up against. When you deploy, you can obviously define the security settings. That can be done. So based on the given environment, you will be able to configure. Maybe one more last question. Another question, what else can we test? This is a good question. The reason behind, where with NUnit you will be able to query the data source directly and you can validate the numbers. How about, there will be some interesting question, how to validate the formatting or the color of a particular font based on the validation. Unfortunately, you will not be able to interpret the report directly. That can be done using Selenium WebDriver based testing, but obviously you need to leverage your team and skills to implement that functionality.
Alrighty. Well, we want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch the webinar today. We're very appreciative to To our presenter, of course, Nate, we're very appreciative that you took the time out of your busy day to make this presentation. I did want to also mention, a few folks at the beginning said the slides were not moving on the intro presentation, and I think what was going on is my machine actually locked up, and so the PowerPoint was not moving from slide to slide. So I do apologize for that. But again, just to kind of rehash, you can always go out to the PASS website, so SQLPass.org, and then look up the BI virtual chapter. It'll give you information about our upcoming meetings. And then in general, of course, the SQL Pass site will have a lot of the information I mentioned about the SQL Saturday, and also the upcoming webinars that are being presented by some of the other virtual chapters. So feel free to jump over there. And again, I do apologize. And also kind of just to mention, the recording will be made available within about a week on the YouTube website. I do think there's some problems with the recording because it stalled when my machine locked up, but as soon as Nate started his presentation, we went ahead and I restarted the recording again there, so it will start at that point, so we should be good to go. But again, we're very appreciative of you all taking the time for the session today. You'll notice that the contact information from Nate is on the screen there. Feel free to join LinkedIn and to meet up with Nate there. We're very appreciative for y'all's time. Hopefully y'all will have a good weekend. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for this opportunity and arranging all these details.
Sure. Anytime. Anytime.
Do you like to pass the feedback to the audience? Is there any way